Yeah, isn't it funny? Even at a memorial service, people don't want to sit in the front. I mean, I understand a biostatistics class, but at a memorial service.
Go ahead, yeah, you're sure.
Everybody's here, I guess. Yeah?
Anybody that's out has to use a password.
So my sisters and I want to thank you all for helping us share in the memory of our mother and spend a few moments reflecting on her life. Rogelia Lilia Molina, better known as Lilia, Lil, Auntie Lil, and of course Mom, was a talented, intelligent, and complex woman. Our earliest memories of her public persona involve her work with the Southwest Voter Registration and the Mexican American Legal Defense Fund, where she was instrumental in fighting for voter rights for Spanish-speaking Americans. Her commitment to the Spanish-speaking immigrant community influenced her decision to study law at UC Davis, a decision she made after having had her 3 children, Becky, Tiki, and myself. After obtaining her degree, she worked as a legislative aide for the California State Legislature and was also a delegate for the Democratic Party Platform Committee. One of my favorite photos shows her shaking President Carter's hand at a delegate meeting. But even though this was her public face, which we chose to honor in her obituary, I'm not sure if in her later years my mother would have thought of herself so much as an activist. I personally tend to think of her as an artist, and I think she might agree. Who can forget her gorgeous quilts with their beautiful fabrics, imaginative designs, and superior craftsmanship? In the year before her stroke, she was working on what I think was her masterpiece, which had raised flowers and birds and sculpted in fabric in ways that I would not have dreamt possible. She turned her artistic attention to so many facets of her life, including the wonderful paintings and pastel portraits she made earlier in her life, as well as her complex, comically extensive Department 56 Christmas villages that had great influence on other relatives. I think Uncle Jimmy's Homey Village was a humorous attempt to compete with his sister.
I also have the Department 56.
Yeah.
So babies.
She passed on this artistic sensibility to her children. Tiki is the most obvious heir with her own well-known talents as a visual artist. Look at what she's wearing. However, believe it or not, I think of myself as an artist more than a scientist, and I credit our mother for that birthright. Even Becky, who we think of as a serious physician, is in fact an artist in her own right with her breathtakingly beautiful nature photographs. I don't know that my mother was much of a performing artist, even though 2 of her children are, Tiki the musician, and my own interests in stage and dance. But then again, in sorting through her belongings, we did find 3 pairs of jazz dance shoes. Who knew? In any case, Tiki has shared with me what she thinks our mother's impact was on her performing arts interests. Well, 90% of my comedy routine was about her. Our mother was an artist and valued her intuitive side and sought many ways of expressing it. One of them was, of course, astrology. Everybody knows that this was one of her principal, long-standing interests. I tell friends that she was a semi-professional astrologer because, indeed, occasionally people in her circle respected her services enough to pay for them. She had an extensive astrology library ranging from beginner textbooks to books involving quite advanced topics, and always sought new methods to add to her toolkit. In her own way, she approached this discipline with a certain level of scientific inquiry, filling binders with astrological charts of celebrities, historical figures, as well as notorious criminals. Tiki recently remarked on how our mother was so interested in predicting the future, and that her own son has an established career doing pretty much the same thing. After all, what is a statistician but a modern-day soothsayer? Astrology does use mathematics, after all. The level of focus she brought to her study of astrology, she bequeathed that to Becky, who we all know is extremely focused, if she's anything at all. I think Becky's determination to succeed as a physician mirrors our mother's own focused determination, whether it was applied to voter rights or to astrology. We didn't always find her astrological readings completely accurate all the time. What soothsayer has a 100% success rate? But in the words of Tiki on Facebook, We miss our mother's shitty astrological readings. And we appreciate how many of you have remarked on my mother's warmth and hospitality. Shortly after she passed, Jennifer made a wonderful statement about how, when we were all younger, our mother always made her, Nicole, and Andy feel welcome at holiday dinners. So I'm going to repeat her words. So says Jennifer, there are some things I wanted to be sure to share with you, Auntie Lil, because they make up some of my favorite memories from childhood. You and your family were always such a big part of my life growing up. There was nothing I loved more than coming over to your big, beautiful homes and celebrating occasions, Christmas, Thanksgiving, birthdays. I loved seeing you and your brothers fooling around and doting on Tita. There was so much love. I loved being able to spend time with your kids, whom I looked up to more than anyone else, and sit in their rooms and talk with them and watch movies with them. They were my idols. I loved visiting with all of my cousins, even though I was the one who always looked like I didn't belong in pictures. I loved the kitchen, which was the center of all the excitement and caduching, and I feel privileged that Tita got to meet Zach in your home. Thank you for being the person who first taught me how to use a word processor while I was going to City College, and for letting me use your home as my destination after classes. Thank you for helping nurture our extended family that was such a big part of my childhood and teenage years. The times we all spent together really are the things I remember most fondly. That statement touched me very deeply, because I had very fond memories as a child of playing with Jennifer and enlisting her in some crazy play acting. Maybe that's what led to my flair for drama. A number of my friends who met my mom have offered similar reflections on her generosity, from kind words to tarot card readings to small gifts of personal talismanic significance. Her generosity extended to acts of kindness like supplying her friend Ani with regular shipments of simple but indispensable staples that Ani needed during a 3-year silent retreat. Such generosity was recognized by many of our mother's friends in her spiritual community. Marguerite, one of her friends from the Far Horizons group on whose board our mother served, had this to say about her passing. She is a beautiful soul. I love her. Our mother's warmth carried over to her life in Weiser, Idaho, where she made an impression among her neighbors as a warm and generous hostess. Her partner Lane, as well as many other friends from the later years of her life, have expressed great sadness at losing her. Her compassion extended to care of the sick. In moving to Weiser, she took on the mantle of caring for a friend who had been diagnosed with terminal cancer, a decision that I will admit was quite controversial for the 3 of us children. She had already endured the difficulty of caring for her late husband, Robert Nevis, who also fought cancer and lost. Along with Uncle Andy, she took on the burdens of caring for Tita, our beloved grandmother, whose company I hope she is enjoying in whatever peaceful afterlife we are permitted. Her compassion for the terminally ill had, I believe, great influence on Becky, who makes her career caring for the ill. I spent a great deal of time with our mother in the latter years of her life, both in Weiser and the several Thanksgiving holidays she spent with me in Boston. We had some time to reflect on her life and the decisions she made and why she made them. I don't think it's disrespectful to acknowledge that she could sometimes be a challenging person. That is always the case with complex individuals, and perhaps one reason I feel more at home with difficult people. She reflected on growing up in a multicultural household in a multicultural neighborhood, populated with entertaining characters, the innocence with which she entered into marriage with our father, Philip Hausman, and some of the events that she would say opened her eyes to a wider world. She talked about her childhood, her first marriage, her second, much longer marriage to our stepfather, Bob, what she felt was her karmic duty to care for Bob during his illness, and similarly for others. She reflected on her decision to move to Weiser, and how much she loved her property on the Snake River. I remember her telling me on a cold, snowy night in Boston how much she missed her home, the relative silence of her rural property, the deer that would regularly visit her apple trees, the peach trees whose decimation by flood she mourned, and of course the cats. I can't count how many cats she fed and provided sanctuary for in her later years. We would really like to be able to reflect on her early years, but of course the 3 of us weren't there. So we'd like to offer others an opportunity now to remember her, but first I've asked my Uncle Andy to fill in the blanks on the early years and to say some words about growing up with her. So I'm going to give the podium over to him and close the words of her friend Marguerite. She had a difficult horoscope. That is usually the way for highly evolved souls.
Right here. Thank you very much. I will try and capture some of the earlier experiences we had with my dear sister Lil. But firstly, I want to thank you very much for sharing in this celebration with us. You honor us with your presence here today. Lilia's accomplishments were many and very ably described by Andy. Her passing was untimely and unexpected, and we are never really ready to accept the news when we get it. Remembering the early years is very challenging, and I really wish I had paid more attention and asked more questions when I had the chance. But looking back, the memories may be blurred, but some general themes stand out as being influential in our growing up. Most importantly was our family. Our father, Andres Molina, immigrated from southern Spain at the young age of 17. He came to the U.S. with his father, Paco, to join relatives from a small Spanish village in the same province of Almeria. After a few years, Paco decided to return to Spain, but my father liked it here. So the story goes that he hid behind some crates on a loading dock, and when it was time to go, the ship sailed with Paco, but without Andres. All right, one thing we did inherit, though, is the name Andy. In this room today, at this moment, there are at least 7 Andys. I counted. Our mother, Lilia, was a frequent visitor to the U.S. Her sister and brother-in-law operated migrant farm worker labor camps at farms in the Central Valley during the harvest season. They would set up operations at the start of the season, return to Mexico at the conclusion of the harvest. Elodia, the youngest, would often accompany her sister to help run the business during these trips to California. By the time my father had reached his 30s, he had become a sales agent, calling on farms and labor camps. He sold business machines, men's suits, shoes, and other merchandise. Because he spoke Spanish, and by then respectable English, he took orders from the business end of the operations for office equipment and supplies, and also requests from the braceros. Braceros are temporary agricultural workers from Mexico, for suits, watches, shoes, and other desirable items that were unavailable to them, since most of these farms were located too far from cities of any size. On one of these calls, he saw and was smitten by Elodia's beauty, as reflected in my own children and grandchildren. And the attraction was mutual. They hoped to marry, but Elodia's older sister, the boss, disapproved of this union, as she had other plans for Elodia in Mexico. Well, Mom and Dad found a way around this, and in 1937, they eloped. They were married in Reno and settled in Sacramento. This was a matter of great consequences at the time, so it took a few years for the now Molina family to reconcile with the boss, but it all ended well. Our home was happy and secure. We never had to do with the essentials, especially during the difficult years of World War II. Other families, however, could barely provide their children with necessities, but my father had a permanent job with the railroad and had reduced his business activities to weekends when the war effort permitted. He was a sensitive and generous man who knew hunger and hard times firsthand from the Depression years. On many occasions, I would see him take a down-and-out man to a restaurant, pay for his meal so that the man would have at least one good day. He was grateful for his good fortune, friends, and family, and those lessons made an impression on us. He and my mother hosted hundreds of Latin immigrants and visitors over the years, some of whom stayed on as boarders for extended periods. Our house became the unofficial post office for letters deposited and held for hundreds of Spanish-speaking visitors and travelers needing a focus for their comings and goings. Our family's daily language was Spanish, and we grew up in a Mexican household honoring Mexican culture, cuisine, and traditions. I had considerable difficulty with English, so I failed the first grade. But Lilia was not deterred and thrived in all of her studies. We attended a local parochial school called Holy Angels, an easy walk from our home. And Lilia was always at the head of her class, winning praise and awards for her achievements. As me, not so much. We pretty much ran a parallel course at home, fighting when the opportunity arose, as close siblings do, with one often trying to frame the other one with one crime or another, and often sporting a happy smirk of satisfaction when the other one got nailed, because Mom bought one story over the other. I both received and gave my share of smirky looks. But we also had periods of détente and cooperation. One of those was at Christmas time, when good Catholic school students were encouraged or required or forced to sell Christmas seals. Christmas seals were stamps with a Christian scene, like a Madonna or nativity scene. We sold sheets of all of these stamps to relatives and neighbors for the purpose of decorating their Christmas cards and envelopes. We worked at it together, but Lilia was very good at it. And she always made her quota and collected her statue of those little plastic statues of Jesus or a crucifix, or holy cards.